In this video, we are going to be changing the rusty brake discs on this 2004 Mercedes SL55 AMG. Ever since we bought this car, these discs have been rusty. There's nothing much wrong with the discs or the pads. It's just that they're rusty, so it's just a cosmetic change. What you tend to find is on these cars, the front discs wear out faster than the rear discs, but the front discs on this car are pretty new, and the pads especially engineered to leave a small ridge at the top of the disc, so you can put your hand through there and see how big that ridge is to decide whether or not you need to get new discs or pads for your car. There's a couple of things worth mentioning about this job. The first of which is, if you change your brake discs, you should change your pads at the same time, because the discs and the pads basically wear out or wear in together. You could take that disc off and put it in a bath of evaporust and get rid of that rust if you so desired, but we've actually gone ahead and brought new Brembo discs. And once again, when it comes to buying discs and pads for your Mercedes or any car for that matter, my advice would be to either get the OEM ones or to get a high quality brand. So we've bought Brembo discs for this particular car. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that when you take the brake disc off, you're going to have to take the caliper off to do that. And the caliper bolts are generally in really super tight. I read somewhere that the torque spec is 180 Newton meters, which I can hardly believe, but that's what I read. Plus they'll have some thread locker in there. You're almost certainly going to need a breaker bar to get them off, but the trouble is, if you don't have a ramp, you won't be able to get a breaker bar underneath the car to get them off. So you may be better off going to a tire shop or calling in a favor from a friend to actually put the car up on a ramp just to break those bolts before you start the job. And the last thing I would say is that when you're taking calipers off, ideally you should replace the caliper bolts. Now, each one of those bolts costs about £10 plus VAT from Mercedes, so it's going to cost you over £50, or about £50, just for the replacement bolts. And you should also, when you take the bolts out of the calipers, run a not a tap but a thread cleaner through that to clean out any residual rust. This car has the Sensatonic brake-by-wire, and therefore the brakes are electronically controlled by the SBC pump. And what I'm going to do first is just disconnect the electrical connection here, because what I don't want to do is inadvertently lose my fingers when I'm changing either the discs or the pads. If you haven't disconnected one of these plugs before, you have to pull up this lever here, and as you pull it up, it will automatically disconnect the plug like so. Next up, we're going to get the car jack from the back of the car and jack both sides of the car up and put it on axle stands. These are the new brake discs here. They are possibly the heaviest brake discs I've ever come across. It is almost impossible for me to lift those. Those are heavier than my daughter, which possibly explains one of the reasons why this car was so heavy to start off with. What is super annoying, having just had these wheels powder coated, is I've managed to chip the powder coating in two places just whilst getting these off. So my advice would be maybe to put a little bit of electrical tape over here if you have had your wheels powder coated, to stop that happening. We're going to loosen all the bolts while the car is still on the ground, and then using the screwdriver from the toolkit, just pop this out, and we're going to use the actual jack that came with the car. We're just going to put some little bits of wood underneath the jack, not least to protect the paintwork on the jack, but it just means we can get the car a little bit higher up to get that axle stand under. Make sure you've either got the keys with you so you can unlock the car, turn the alarm off when you're jacking it up, or actually turn the anti-tilting off on the car. We're going to use this axle stand just on this rubber mount here. Be careful that you don't inadvertently put it on the plastic under tray, otherwise you will crack that. Well, that's a bit annoying. No wonder these are so heavy. These are the front brake discs, which are bigger. You can see they've got 4 venting holes there. If you have a look on the front, you can see the front discs indeed have 4 venting holes. So we're going to have to order the correct ones. Just arrived in the post is what I hope are the correct Brembo brake discs for these cars. Now these have got 3 vent holes and these have just got 2. I don't think that matters as long as they're the same thickness and the same diameter. We're going to start off by knocking out these 2 pins here and sliding the brake pads out. That might, if we're extremely lucky, let us get this brake disc off without actually removing the caliper, because to remove the caliper you've got to remove these 2 E-bolts here, and it's very difficult to get a wrench in there or an impact driver. So let's try taking the pads out first. We tap those pins out partially. Now to get them out the rest of the way, you've got to push this spring in. You should just be able to wiggle these out like so. I'm just going to use this caliper retraction tool here just to push the brake pads or the pistons in a bit to help me get those brake pads out. Now you will see it is much easier to get those pads out. There's actually not much wrong with these pads, to be honest. Once you've taken that screw out, in theory this should just come off, but usually it is rusted on there solid. You can try bashing either the hub here or the face of the brake disc if you're not planning on using it again with a hammer to crack it loose, but an alternative is to use a brake disc puller. So a brake disc puller hooks onto the brake disc like that. I'm putting it on the middle here. You could put it behind as well if you had enough room, and then as you tighten this it'll pull the brake disc off the hub. I'm just going to put a bolt in there just to stop this falling off. Obviously ideally you should be taking off the caliper, but there may not be enough space to actually get this brake hub off with the caliper on, but we'll soon find out. Wow. Now the moment of truth to see if this hub actually comes off with the caliper still in place. And the answer is no. Sadly, it's not possible to get this off with the caliper still in place. Now those caliper bolts are in there solid, and if the car was up on a ramp you could get a massive great big breaker bar, so we might actually have to get our magnetic induction torch on the back of those bolts there, because they will also be sealed in with Loctite. Those rear caliper bolts will not come off with the car on the ground, so we've called in a little favour from Auto Classico and just borrowed one of their ramps, and that allows us to get this breaker bar on. Look at that. To say those bolts are in there tight would be an understatement. That's just snapped the end off the extension. To get this top caliper bolt out, you're going to first of all need to unclip this here and then slide this off. Now this has a tab here which you push down and then it pulls towards you, and that will allow you to get a socket with an extension on there. Just before you take the second bolt out all the way, make sure you're holding on to the calipers. We're just going to hang this up there for a moment. Once you've taken the caliper off and broken that seal there, taken that small screw out, this should just pull straight off. Here is the new Brembo disc compared with the old one. You can see this has got 3 vent holes here. That's not important. This comes with a new screw here to attach it to the hub, and just before we put that on we'll just check that this surface is nice and flat. Sometimes you can put a little bit of special brake grease on here just to help get it off in the future, but we're not going to do that on this occasion. Incidentally, while you're here, the struts here I can see have got a slight split in the dust cover. Now you can get those dust covers from AB Specialist in the Netherlands, and it's worth replacing those so you don't get dust and moisture in there to ruin your struts, because they are very expensive. So we'll be ordering a set of those and at some stage fitting them. This here retaining screw needs a little dab of blue thread lock on it, and then it needs to be torqued to the correct spec, which I'll leave on the screen. Another thing worth pointing out is these dust shields here. If yours is rusty, you can actually get these from Phoebe as a replacement. We won't be doing that on this occasion, but at some stage, if we ever take the suspension off this car and powder coat it, we'll sort that out at the same time. As I mentioned, you should replace these bolts every time you take the caliper off. If you don't replace them, remember to strip off the old thread lock, put some new thread lock on and clean the bolts up. I will leave the part number of these bolts on the screen below, but they are very expensive, about £10 plus VAT each. And it's a good idea just to go over the face of this disc with some brake cleaner just to get rid of any factory oils that they may have put on there to stop the disc rusting. Well, I do actually have new rear brake pads for this car, so I'm just going to fit them. These are Brembo ones here. And before fitting them, you just need to make sure the pistons are pushed all the way in, just using the retraction tool. And then these should just slide in like so. On these Brembo pads, make sure you get the shims on the right way. It's actually easy to put them on back to front, but they should clip over the pad like that. When fitting Brembo discs, and the same is true probably of any brake discs, when you've fitted them, you should actually check that the run out is within tolerance. On these particular discs, you basically put one of these gauges here, 5mm from the outer diameter, and then spin the wheel. And what you've got to check is that there's a reading not greater than 0.1mm on this gauge when you spin the wheel, and that will tell you whether the disc is warped or not. Now that we've zeroed the gauge, just pressing the 0 button there, when we turn it, this will tell us if the brake disc is running true. You can see the 0.1 there is basically within the tolerance. So we've turned this disc all the way around now, and we can see that this is within the 0.1mm tolerance that Brembo specify. This side of the car has got the brake pad wear indicator, and that just pulls straight out like that. We should be able to reattach that into the new pads, but let's just squeeze these pads out and see if we can pull the old pads out. This brake pad wear indicator should just pop out. That just pops out like so. If you are going to change to Brembo discs and pads, you're going to need to get a new brake wear sensor from Brembo, because this one here from Mercedes is different. The Mercedes pads have holes drilled in there for that rod there. The Brembo ones just sit inside the pad there. They're about £3 or £4 from German, Swedish, French car parts, so we'll order one of those and put that on. If you simply leave the brake wear sensor unplugged, you'll see this message on the dash. We've been along to GSF to pick up one of these Brembo brake pad wear sensors. Now you'll notice that the shape of this sensor is designed to fit that style of pad. The standard Mercedes pads have little drilled holes, and the brake pad wear sensor looks different, but hopefully this will not trigger any warnings on the dash. The new brake wear sensor just slides down into that groove like that. Now there are two ways you can put it in. I'm not sure if it makes a difference whether that is on the inside, but I can't see why it would be on the inside, because that now sits flush. So if anybody does know the answer, please do let me know. We can always change it if it's wrong. Once you've got the pads back in, you just need to plug the brake sensor in. It doesn't matter which way round it goes. It just plugs in horizontally though, as opposed to vertically, and it should clip in nice and firmly, like so. We've got those brake pads and discs back on, and that just looks a million times better. No more rusty brake discs. The wheel bolts are torqued to 130 Newton meters. The last thing we need to do is just check the level of the brake fluid and obviously plug the SBC back in. And if you haven't done that before, that just clips in like that, and then you push that down and that locks the plug in. Our brake fluid is showing just below the maximum level. We're just going to take this car for a test drive now, just bed the brakes in. When you've got new pads and new discs, just drive gently at first. Don't jam your foot on the brakes and try not to engage the ABS. I'm going to finish the video here just with where we got the brake discs and pads from. Brakes are obviously a critical part or safety part of the car, so if you are in any doubt, please just take your car to a professional and get it done. But if you're like me and you like to save a few bob on labour, then it's not a difficult job. It is something you can definitely attempt yourself. We got the rear brake pads from Car Parts in Motion, £84.29. The front discs, which you bought in error, were just £151.48, which is a bargain. The rear discs, which we got from World Car Parts, took an age to arrive, but once again a bargain price, just £149.99 delivered.